Hi, welcome to Extra Drama Sweet Valley Diaries for book number 21, Runaway. I'm your host, Marissa Flaxbart, and joining me again is the beautiful, the talented Jocelyn Scofield.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm very happy to have you here. One of my favorite things from being a host of the show, the experiences that I've had having guests on the show, has been a phenomenon where when I tell my guest that it's time for the part of the podcast where we talk about boys, a couple of times the guest, somebody I know, one of my friends, starts to sing Beautiful Boys.
Oh, that's great.
And I know in that moment that person listens to my podcast. But also it's just really cool because it's such a perfect song, and I enjoy listening to it. I should play it in its entirety for listeners sometime.
Sure.
Except, although, just, buy it from iTunes, listeners. And that song is, of course, by Jocelyn. From A Witty Girl is the name of the album. So when I was listening to that record through for the first time, A Beautiful Boys, it did stand out to me, but the one that most made me think of Sweet Valley Diaries was another song. A song called Bad Boy in High School.
He had ebony hair, killer blue eyes, the devil may care, lover divine, a black leather coat he wore in the snow, wore in the summertime. He'd walk through the halls, owning the place, cocky and tall, a grin on his face, a girl at each side, a lion with his pride. He was a bad boy in high school, the one you thought was so cool, the one who smoked and broke the rules. Bad boy in high school, if only he'd have noticed you, if only he'd loved you too, you'd be together.
In the very first book, there is a bad boy named Rick Andover who, is a high school dropout, and he drives a Camaro, and he's, a very bad boy. And it almost went the other way. I almost asked you if I could use that song for the podcast as opposed to Beautiful Boys. But Beautiful Boys is a little more universal for the part of the podcast where we, objectify the various boys in the book.
Yes, it's an objectifying song.
Turnabout is fair play, right? So I thought maybe it would be fun to talk a little bit about that song.
Sure. Yeah. So it's out of the album, it's a little bit more of a story song. As opposed to Beautiful Boys, which is just sort of a fun song. And the song came mostly from a guy I went to high school with. And he was a bit older than me and would have these parties. He was very much the song is basically about him. Sort of made up stuff at the end, but he was the kid in high school who got in trouble, ended up with detentions, had parties where his parents were probably home when he was having the party, and there was alcohol there and marijuana. And you sort of knew going to his house that it would be a drinking party, and there'd be older people there, and there'd be people that have graduated, and then also ninth graders or
ninth graders.
Yeah, I think I probably went to this party in 9th or 10th grade.
I like the way you said marijuana because it was very much in the spirit of the book we just read where marijuana was referenced.
Absolutely.
I think the word joint might have been used at some point. But.
Yeah, there would have been definitely joints and cigarettes, and I didn't smoke in high school, so even cigarettes were
oh yeah. When I was in high school, I actually, if I found out that someone was a smoker, it ruined my opinion of them.
Yeah.
I was really intense about it. I don't exactly know why. I mean, I've always been very sensitive to cigarette smoke, but I think it was even more so when I was younger. But that being said, I was actually impolitely obsessed with it. Really
I feel the same. I remember I had finding out somebody that I was close to smoked. I was horrified, how could you? And I don't even know why I felt that strongly about it.
I don't really quite know why either. It seems sort of mean now,
Yeah, I guess maybe it's illegal, but so is drinking, and drinking didn't seem that horrible.
Well, just for the record, smokers, listeners out there, I still think you should quit. I don't think it's a good idea to smoke, but I don't not want to be friends with you because of it.
No, it's just a little bit smelly, you know? Like,
yeah.
So anyway,
that was his own tangent. But
that was like our bias, or
that's interesting that we had that in common.
Yeah.
Because when I think back on that time, I actually I feel a little bit ashamed at how, like, vocal I was about my displeasure.
I think I was like a little bit of a goody two-shoes, because I remember going to these parties and maybe I drank or maybe I didn't. I don't even remember if I drank or not. But yeah, I think I was a bit of a goody two-shoes at that age. So this guy that I was thinking of when I wrote the song, he was older. He had these parties. And he was definitely, in high school, he was definitely very cool because of this. Because he had these parties, because he sort of like bucked the law, because he got in trouble and, you know, sort of defied authority. And then later on in life, or actually even when I got into high school, like when I was like a junior and senior in high school, he was still at these like high school parties. And so it was a little bit like, he wasn't quite as cool, but it wasn't like that bad. And then like as I got older, I heard stories that he ended up doing nothing with his life because he didn't care about school at all. So he ended up, actually, I'll tell this story, but like, it will reveal who it is. But I don't think he'll ever listen to this podcast. But so my mom told me this story. I think this was like right before I wrote the song, that she was, she still lives in the town that we grew up in, or that I went to high school and not grew up in. But, and she was walking and she saw him and she said hello. She was a teacher at the high school, so she knew all of the students. And she was my teacher. And she asked him how he was doing. He had a child, and he had a baby with him. And my mom stopped and chat for a little bit, and then he asked her for money to buy diapers, and my mom's lovely. I'm sure she gave it to him. I don't know. I don't remember that part of the story, but I remember thinking like, wow, for years in high school where you're the coolest, you're seen as this really cool guy because you do these things that are seen as a high schooler as cool, and then you're as an adult, and all the things that you did as a high schooler are the reason that you're an adult who doesn't have an education, who wasn't able to get into college, who doesn't have it together enough to like hold down a job. That was very like real to me at that moment. So the first part of the song is as a perspective of a high schooler, to be like, oh, this guy is so cool, you know, like he drinks, he has sex, like all these things are like, oh my gosh, like this is the bad boy who is held up on some pedestal. And then you look from an adult perspective and you're like, wow, at the end of the song, yeah, he still was like the same and just like a loser, basically.
Even though he hasn't changed, the fact that he hasn't changed is what makes him sad now instead of being cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And not long ago you saw him again. His ebony hair gray to the ends. The last you'd heard was he had been in and out of jail. The girl at his side was trashy in plastic boots, a cut-off tee. Looking back, you thought, hell, that could have been me. With the bad boy in high school, the one you thought was so cool, the one who always smokes and broke the rules. The bad boy in high school, if only he'd have noticed you, if only he'd have loved you too, you'd be together.
That's so interesting. It makes me think about the way that in high school we are all, and I'm sure this is still true, we're all really obsessed with high school. Like, we're obsessed with what the culture is there, like what the status is there. Even if you know that you're like going to move on to something else, it's very difficult not to get caught up in everyone's role. Even, I've said before on the podcast that my high school didn't have bad cliques. Like, we didn't have a really strong clique situation, but you're very, very interested in whether it was like who is valedictorian or whether it's like who it has the cutest boyfriend or whatever. And yeah, those things really do not matter at all past high school, other than the way that they affect you emotionally in your development.
Yeah.
Nobody in the rest of your life, unless you stay in your hometown, really knows. Like, it's actually, I just had a visit from a very dear friend of mine who I knew in high school. He was older than me, but he lives and has children, in our town, in the town that we went to high school with. And he has really done like the best version of this that one can do, where he knows people. He does work at the high school, and he knows people of all different ages in the town. And like, if you can really, you stay in your town and you can like be a good person and continue to be a good person, then that is a way to do the like, quote unquote, not changing thing. Right. But that would be weird if a person were just like still obsessed with still trying to be that person, as opposed to like continuing to live one's life and grow and learn and make a life for yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. So where I went to high school is a small town, and I don't keep in contact with a ton of people that I went to high school with, or hardly any. But it isn't uncommon for some of the people I went to high school with to almost not leave high school, like not leave that mentality, not leave that sort of like, to just not grow up. Mm-hmm. And not that you have to leave your hometown to do that, but I don't know, maybe it's harder, but the people that were the coolest in high school are the biggest losers, like as adults, that I've found, which is very harsh to say, but...
Well, that was going to be my next question is, have you found, or do you think that the people that you know or that you have known that are most likely to sort of stay in high school are the ones who had it the best in high school? I mean, it's just like the 17, that song... she learned the truth at 17.
Oh,
that
yeah.
one.
Oh, that's a good song.
It is a beautiful song.
Yeah.
And the whole like message of the song is kind of like, this is, if this is the best that life is going to get for you, then it's like, it's all downhill from here, and it's like, you're better off if you're maybe a loser in high school.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate to me, like,
not as a rule.
Yeah. That the sort of the qualities that are valued in, let's say, after high school are not valued in high school by maybe kids. I'm sure parents value things like studiousness, and being kind to others and responsibility. But passion, in high school, other kids don't care about that. They care about sort of superficial things, so that it isn't the real world at all. Like I feel like there are people that I went to high school with that were like the quarterback on the team, or like the cool guy in classes, that they never got out of high school because those were the best days of their lives. So why grow up when the best days of your lives were when you were like 15, 16, 17, like, that's the best it's going to get. I might as well just stay there forever.
Right,
kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, and just to tie it all back to Sweet Valley High, I mean, I think that's why it makes such a great setting for a soap opera. Because all this stuff does matter so much. And we were saying in our main episode that Jessica Wakefield is really much more like a teenager in a lot of ways than Elizabeth. And a part of that is her like devotion, obsession even with status. I mean, it's
shopping. Yeah. She's like, there's a bunch of shopping references, which is totally cool. I think I was obsessed with clothes as well in high school.
Yeah.
I still am a little bit.
Well, you have some great clothes.
I do like clothes and shoes.
But I think that, I guess if I were a high schooler now, or if I were writing for, high schoolers now, I would maybe try to encourage like thinking beyond here.
Yeah, or just knowing especially if you were, I can't say that I was miserable in high school. I fit in fine. But that it's like life begins after high school. Life doesn't end at high school, you know?
I wonder if in some ways, I don't know, but maybe that's easier to keep a perspective on in the world now, just because like the world is so much smaller. Like you have it's so much easier to get a glimpse of what is going on outside your high school, outside your town or your state or your country. Yeah. That if you don't have to try as hard to keep your eyes like on the larger picture.
Yeah.
I don't know.
One thing I think is also really interesting about sort of high school is that, and kids in general, is I just remember it being like, I was into music and I didn't care, but people who did care, if they were into music or if they were into something a lot, like it wasn't cool to be like into things, like to be like Elizabeth in the book is very like, she's like all passionate about journalism and writing and stuff. But it's a lot cooler to just not care, to be like Nikki and like not care about anything and be like, that's not my scene and I'm too good for that, and not be excited about anything, to be sort of like aloof in life in general.
Yeah. It's making me think that Nikki Shepard in Runaway is this glimpse into this whole demographic of Sweet Valley High that we never hear about, which is like the kids that were not like obsessed with high school and like being all-American or on every team, or like, because sometimes it feels like there are only like 20 kids in this high school, but it's just that like those are the ones that we focus on. Everybody else is out behind the bleachers, like smoking marijuana, cigarettes, or in Tierra Verde at somebody's late night party, passing beers around and playing pool.
Yeah.
Well, Jocelyn, thank you so much again for joining me, and thank you for your music, for the music you share with the podcast, and the music you share with the world.
Oh, that was so sweet.
I know, that's a really, really cheesy thing to say, but I do mean it. Thank you very much. Everybody, if you haven't already, I don't know what you're doing, sleeping on this, but look up Jocelyn. She's doing some very cool, very original, beautiful things. And I get to sit next to her and sing all the time. So
absolutely. We sing together all the time.
It's a real pleasure for me. Thank you so much. Tune in next week to find out about, Dee Dee and Bill and stuff. Bye.
So does that make me Miss America?
For some reason, I have a song from Bye Bye Birdie in my head.
Interesting.
I can't think of any reason why it would be in my head right now.
What song is Bye Bye Birdie? Or like what song is it?
What song is it?
Yeah.
The song that I have in my head is the We Love You, Conrad. Oh, yes, we do. No reason. No reason.
Oh, that's funny.
It makes me think that I'm like receiving, like intercepting radio waves or something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's funny. They're not from here because I don't really listen to musicals. Maybe they're from my neighbor.
Yeah. Speaking of music, I should introduce the show.
Okay.